Okay, I have to be honest with you right off the bat. I was looking at the reading list for today, and when I saw Revelation chapter 18 staring back at me,
Yeah.
my immediate instinct was to close the laptop,
Right.
maybe go make a sandwich, hide under the covers, basically do anything other than read it. It's got a serious reputation, doesn't
It
it?
absolutely does. I think for most people, even those who aren't super religious, Revelation 18 is, well, it's the ultimate disaster movie script.
Yeah.
It's doom, gloom, economic collapse, fire, smoke. It's the heavy stuff.
It's the chapter where the world ends. Or at least that's what I've always been told. We see it in movies, we hear it in doomsday predictions, but, and this is a massive but, I actually sat down and read the source material we have for today's deep dive, and my jaw was honestly on the floor.
Hmm.
Because the authors here are arguing for something completely different. They're suggesting that this scary chapter isn't a prediction of a future stock market crash or World War III. They're saying it's actually hopeful.
It is profoundly hopeful. But, and this is the tricky part, to see the hope, you have to be willing to completely change your perspective on who the villain of the story is.
Okay.
If you read Revelation 18 through the lens of, CNN or modern geopolitics, you're going to be terrified. You're going to be looking for bunkers. But the source material we're analyzing today argues that this chapter is actually a historical and spiritual recounting of the cross.
Right.
It's a story about liberation.
Liberation. That is not a word I usually associate with the fall of Babylon.
Hmm.
But that is our mission today. We're going to unpack this source material that claims Revelation 18 is actually about the transition from the Old Covenant to the New Covenant.
That's right.
It's about the collapse of a system of legalism so that a system of grace can rise. But to get there, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the city in the room. We need to talk about Babylon.
We certainly do. You can't understand the chapter without identifying the main character.
Right. And in the movies, or even in most Sunday schools, Babylon is usually, I don't know, a futuristic evil empire. Or maybe a revived Rome. Or I've heard people say it's New York City because of the trade centers. But our source is pointing the finger somewhere else entirely, somewhere that feels, frankly, a little controversial.
It is controversial if you're used to the futurist view, but the source asks us to put on our detective hats and look at the clues in the text itself. According to the analysis we have, Babylon isn't a literal city that's going to appear in 2050.
Okay.
Babylon is a symbol. It represents a corrupt religious system. Specifically, the source identifies it as Old Jerusalem, the structure of the Old Covenant priesthood and temple system as it existed in the first century after it had rejected Jesus.
Okay, let's pause there, because you just dropped a massive claim. You're saying this famous villain, Babylon, isn't a futuristic super city.
That's what the source argues, yes.
You're saying it's actually the religious establishment of the first century, the temple, the rituals, the Pharisees. That feels counterintuitive. How does the source actually back that up? Like, what is the smoking gun here?
It is counterintuitive if you've only watched the movies. But the source asks us to look at how Babylon is dressed. In the previous chapter, Revelation 17, this whore of Babylon is described vividly. She is dressed in purple, scarlet gold, and precious stones.
Yikes.
Now, if you were a first-century Jewish person deeply familiar with the Torah, and you saw someone dressed in purple, scarlet gold, and precious stones, who would you immediately think of?
I mean, royalty. A queen.
Think more specifically about the religious context. Those are the exact colors and materials of the high priest's garments described in Exodus. The high priest wore the ephod of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet. He wore the breastplate with precious stones.
Oh, wow. So the source is saying the imagery is deliberately mimicking the temple priesthood.
Exactly, but there's a twist. The high priest also wore blue. Blue represented heaven or the law of God.
Ah.
Babylon is wearing purple and scarlet and gold, but the blue is missing.
The heavenly connection is gone.
Precisely. It's a system that looks like the high priest. It has the trappings of the bride of God, but it has lost its heavenly nature. That's why the source calls this the false bride.
The false bride.
Think about that imagery. A bride is supposed to be faithful, loving, devoted, but a false bride is a system that looks religious on the outside. It has the dress, the ceremony, the right words.
It has all the stuff.
It has all the stuff, but on the inside, it has rejected the heart of the husband. It has rejected the groom.
That is a heavy charge. It transforms the image from a political superpower into a religious hypocrite.
It does. The text describes it as a system that favored tradition over truth, power over grace, and legalism over the Lamb. And that is why the fall of Babylon isn't bad news for the believer. If Babylon represents a system of spiritual slavery and dead works, then its fall is actually a jailbreak.
I love that, a jailbreak. But the source material uses some pretty intense language to describe this betrayal. It talks about spiritual fornication. Now, when modern listeners hear fornication, we think purely about physical acts. We think about sex scandals.
Right.
But the source suggests we need to read this differently.
We do. We have to read it with Hebrew eyes, not modern Western eyes.
Yeah.
So, in the Bible, and specifically in the prophets like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Hosea, this is covenantal language. It's about loyalty.
Correct.
God often described his relationship with Israel as a marriage. He was the husband. Israel was the bride.
So when the text says she committed fornication,
It means she gave her loyalty to someone else. It's not that the city was literally sleeping around. It's that the religious system was married to God but was cheating on him.
cheating with who?
With the world. The source explains that the religious system of the first century was supposed to be the interface between God and the nations, a light to the world. But instead, it allied itself with worldly power, the kings of the earth, and with money, the merchants.
So it was cozying up to political rulers for protection and influence.
Exactly. And it was getting in bed with commerce, turning faith to a business.
That reminds me of the scene where Jesus flips the tables in the temple. That wasn't just him having a bad day. That was him calling out this cheating, wasn't it?
That is the perfect connection to make. In fact, our source material draws a direct line to that event. When the temple, which was meant to be a house of prayer intimacy with God, becomes a den of thieves, a marketplace for profit, that is spiritual adultery. You are using the things of God to get in bed with the economy of man. You are the dove to make peace with God.
The source also brings up another specific term, the Jezebel spirit. Now, that's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot in church circles today, usually to describe a woman who's just, I don't know, opinionated or bossy.
Yes, please, let's rescue that term from the way it's used on social media.
Right. The source is using it much more theologically here.
Yes. The source references the Jezebel spirit infiltrating the temple. In the Old Testament, Jezebel wasn't just a bossy woman. She was a queen who actively introduced the worship of Baal and Asherah into Israel.
So she brought in foreign gods.
She mixed the holy with the profane. She didn't necessarily say, don't worship Yahweh. She said, worship Yahweh and Baal.
It was the mixture that was the problem.
Exactly. It was the syncretism. She killed the true prophets and installed false ones. So applying that to Revelation 18, the source argues that the religious system of the first century had become like Jezebel.
How so?
It was using God's name. It was operating out of the temple, but its heart was far from him. It was persecuting the true prophets, Jesus and his apostles, just like Jezebel persecuted Elijah. It was a system that looked like the bride, but acted like a harlot.
And just to ground this in history, because I can hear our listener thinking, okay, this is all great symbolism, but when did this actually happen? So the source is very specific about the timing. This isn't just a floaty spiritual idea.
No, it's anchored in history. The source points firmly to the first century, specifically to the destruction of the temple in AD 70.
Okay.
This is the historical anchor. The fall of Babylon corresponds to that moment when the physical structure of the Old Covenant, the temple in Jerusalem, was destroyed by the Roman armies. It was the final exposure that the house had been left desolate.
Which connects back to what Jesus said right before we went to the cross, right? Your house is left to you desolate.
Exactly. It's the closing of the book on that era. And the source argues that Revelation 18 is describing that closure in vivid apocalyptic detail.
Okay, so we've identified the suspect. Babylon is the corrupt, legalistic religious system of the first century Jerusalem. Now let's look at the crime scene. The chapter opens with this dramatic entrance. Verse 1 says, I saw another angel come down from heaven having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory.
This is where the source gets really fascinating with its symbolism. It identifies this angel or messenger, because that's what the Greek word angelos means, not as just a random celestial being, but as a representation of Jesus himself, or the Holy Spirit moving in the authority of Jesus.
The source notes the phrase great power. What's the significance of that?
Right. And look at the cross-reference. The source connects this directly to Matthew 28:18. After the resurrection, Jesus says, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth.
Ah, so it's that power.
It's that power. This figure in Revelation isn't just physically strong. He carries the authority of the risen king. He's not coming to ask for permission. He's coming to execute a judgment that has already been decided.
And then there's the light The earth was lightened with his glory. I love the imagery here, but it's also kind of intense. It's not like a soft candlelight dinner. It feels more like a police searchlight.
It's exactly like a searchlight. Or think about a dark room that hasn't been cleaned in years. It's full of dust, cobwebs, maybe some vermin.
Yeah.
As long as the lights are off, you can pretend it's a nice room. But when you turn on a high-powered floodlight, the glory, everything is exposed. That's what this light does. It exposes the corruption of the religious system.
It's like the light is the judgment. The light reveals what's really there.
Precisely. The truth itself is the judgment on the lie. And what does it reveal? It reveals that Babylon, this impressive, gold-plated religious structure, has become a habitation of devils.
Yeah, let's unpack that. Verse 2 says Babylon is fallen, and is because the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. That sounds disgusting. And honestly, really harsh if we're talking about the temple.
It is harsh, but it's language that's pulled directly from Old Testament prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah when they describe the fall of the literal city of Babylon. John is reusing that prophetic language to describe the fall of this spiritual Babylon.
So he's using a familiar template to describe a new event.
Exactly, and notice the specific imagery. A cage of every unclean bird. The source connects this back to the parable of the sower. Remember the birds in that parable?
The ones that ate the seeds.
Right. Jesus said the birds represented the wicked one who comes and snatches away the word that was sown in their hearts.
Oh.
The source argues that these birds, these demonic doctrines and influences, had found a nesting ground where in the temple system itself.
So the place that was supposed to be the house of the word became the cage for the birds that steal the word.
That's the tragedy. This mirrors Jesus cleansing the temple when he said, "You have made it a den of thieves." The source interprets den of thieves and habitation of devils at parallel descriptions. The place that should have been the holiest spot on earth had become a cage for deception.
And then we get this loud cry. Verse 2 says the angel cried with a strong voice.
And here is a huge aha connection the source makes. It asks, where else in the New Testament do we hear a strong, loud cry associated with the end of a system?
The cross.
The cross. Jesus cried with a loud voice, "It is finished." Wow.
The source argues that the judgment of Babylon didn't begin when the Roman armies showed up in AD 70. That was just the physical collapse. The judgment happened legally and spiritually at the cross. When Jesus cried out, "It is finished," the verdict was read. The system was judged.
That is a fascinating timeline shift. So the fall is a result of the atonement. It's not just God getting angry and smashing things randomly. It's God establishing a new way, which necessitates the collapse of the old way.
Exactly. You cannot put new wine into old wineskins. If you try, the skins burst. Babylon is the old wineskin. The cross was the pouring of the new wine. The bursting was inevitable.
Which leads us perfectly into the next section, because if the building is about to burst, if the structure is condemned, you don't want to be inside. Verse 4, "Come out of her, my people."
This is one of the most famous lines in Revelation. "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins."
Right.
Now, if Babylon is a literal city, say Los Angeles or London, this means pack your bags, hire a moving van, and get out. But if Babylon is a spiritual system, then it means leave the mindset.
Precisely. The source analyzes this as a call to exit dead religion. It's a call to leave the mixture, mixing law and grace, mixing faith and works, and to embrace the pure relationship of the new covenant.
It's a call to stop participating in a system that's been judged.
Yes. Don't be an accessory to the crime, so to speak. And it's interesting that God still calls them my people. He says, "Come out of her, my people."
I noticed that. He hasn't disowned the individuals inside the system. He's trying to save them from the collapse of the system.
That is a crucial observation. The source highlights the emotional tone here. It's not the voice of a cop evicting squatters. It's the voice of a jealous husband and a loving father. It's comparable to Jesus weeping over Jerusalem in Matthew 23, saying, "How often would I have gathered you, but you would not." He is pleading with them to leave the sinking ship of legalism.
I have to stop you there, though, because we just talked about this tender, weeping father figure.
We've-
And literally one verse later, the text says, "Double unto her double according to her works." That sounds less like a weeping father and more like, well, revenge. How does the source reconcile those two images? Is God sad, or is he getting even?
That is the tension, isn't it? It feels like a mood swing. But the source argues this isn't emotional revenge. It's legal reciprocity based on responsibility. The principle is, To whom much is given, much is required.
Okay, unpack that. How does that apply to first century Jerusalem?
Think about what that city had. They had the law of Moses, they had the Psalms, they had the prophets, they had the daily sacrifices painting a picture of the Messiah.
They had the whole history.
The whole history. And then they had the Messiah himself walking their streets, healing their sick, teaching in their courts. They had more light than any other nation on earth.
So they had no excuse.
None. To reject that much light brings a double judgment. It's not about cruelty, it's about accountability. If a stranger steps on your foot, you excuse it. If your best friend, who knows you have a broken toe, stomps on it on purpose, that's different.
That's a great analogy.
This was a betrayal by the one who knew God best. And the double punishment also echoes the law in Exodus, where a thief had to pay back double. This system had robbed God of his glory and his people of their freedom.
And yet look at their attitude. Verse 7 quotes Babylon saying, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow.
That is pure arrogance. Just astounding pride.
The source calls it spiritual amnesia. But help me understand the widow comment. Why does she specifically say, I am no widow?
This is a deep cut into Old Testament law and prophecy. The source argues that due to her unfaithfulness, her spiritual adultery God had effectively divorced the Old Covenant system. The prophets, like Jeremiah, spoke of this bill of divorce.
So she's been served the papers.
The papers have been served, so technically she isn't a widow because the husband God isn't dead, but she is no longer the wife because the covenant is broken.
But she's in denial.
Complete denial. She's pretending everything is fine. She's carrying on with the rituals, the sacrifices, the pomp and circumstance, acting like she's still the queen of heaven. It's like someone who has been served divorce papers but still shows up to the anniversary dinner expecting a gift, acting like nothing happened. She refuses to acknowledge her true state.
That is a perfect, albeit tragic analogy.
Yeah.
And because of that pride, that refusal to acknowledge her state, the crash is inevitable.
And when that crash comes, it hits where it hurts most, the wallet.
This takes us to the section on the economics of religion, verses 9 through 19. Now, usually when I read this part, I just skim it. It's a long list of cargo: gold, silver, cinnamon, beasts. It reads like a shopping list.
It does. It can feel tedious.
But the source says we need to pay attention to the inventory.
We do. It reads like a manifest of a cargo ship. But the source interprets this as a religious economy. Remember, the temple in Jerusalem wasn't just a church. It was the central bank of the nation. It was the hub of commerce. People came from all over the world for the festivals.
And they had to spend money.
A lot of money. They had to change their Roman coins, which had the emperor's face on them, into temple currency for a fee, of course. And then they had to buy the animals for sacrifice. And the source points out that the list ends with something chilling: slaves and souls of men.
That phrase should stop us in our tracks. Souls of men.
You're listing all these luxury goods: cinnamon, fine linen, ivory, and then right at the end, as if it's just another commodity.
Whoa. Souls of men is listed right next to the cattle.
Right next to the livestock. It's commodification. The source argues that the high priestly family, specifically the house of Annas and Caiaphas, had turned the sacrificial system into a massive racket.
Racket? How?
Well, you couldn't bring your own lamb from your farm. It wasn't clean enough, according to their inspectors. You had to buy their lamb at their inflated prices using their special temple currency.
So they effectively monetized the guilt of the people.
Exactly. They took the soul's desperate need for connection with God and put a price tag on it. That is trading in the souls of men. The system wasn't just trading in goats and grain. It was selling forgiveness. It was selling status. It was making a profit off the spiritual hunger of the people.
That sounds familiar, unfortunately. We see that throughout history whenever religion becomes a business.
It's the same pattern. When the temple became a marketplace, they were essentially monetizing the relationship with God. And when Babylon falls, who is crying? The merchants.
Right. The merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn. But they aren't crying because they miss God.
No, they are crying because, as the text says, no man buyeth their merchandise anymore.
Their cash cow is dead.
Their cash cow is dead. Their business model is destroyed. The source notes they stand afar off. They are terrified of the judgment. They are convicted, perhaps, but they aren't repenting. They are just watching their profit margins burn.
The source connects this standing afar off to the crucifixion, doesn't it?
It does. It draws a parallel to the crowds watching Jesus on the cross from a distance. And there is a deep irony there. They stood afar off while the Lamb of God was judged for them. Now they stand afar off watching their false system being judged.
Wow, that's powerful.
It shows their detachment. They were never truly invested in the heart of God, only in the profits of the system.
And there's this recurring phrase about time. In 1 hour. In 1 day. What's the significance of that? Is it literally 60 minutes? Or is this symbolic?
The source suggests a dual meaning here, which is really helpful. 1 day is linked to the day of the cross.
Okay.
That is the day the legal judgment happened. The verdict was rendered. 1 hour is linked to the swift destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. That is when the sentence was carried out. The historian Josephus describes the siege and fall of Jerusalem as shockingly fast and brutal.
So the cross was the gavel coming down, and AD 70 was the bailiff escorting them out.
Precisely. And the swiftness emphasizes that this wasn't slow decline. It was a sudden, catastrophic collapse, fulfilling Jesus' prophecy that not one stone shall be left upon another.
Which brings us to the mechanism of that destruction.
Sure.
We have this dramatic scene in verse 21 where a mighty angel takes up a stone like a great millstone and casts it into the sea.
This is such a kinetic image. Have you ever seen a millstone? We're talking about a massive round stone used for grinding grain. It weighs hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds.
And the angel throws it with violence.
Yes, the text emphasizes the force. Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down. This isn't a gentle lowering, it's a definitive, forceful end.
The source identifies this stone as Jesus.
Yes, Jesus is the rock. He
Yeah.
is the cornerstone, but there's a duality to the stone. Jesus said, whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken. That's repentance, humility.
Yeah.
You fall on him and your pride is broken.
Okay.
But on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. That's judgment.
Oof. So this is the stone falling.
This is the stone falling. The violence here isn't God losing his temper. It represents the spiritual assault on deception. It is the truth forcefully displacing the lie. It is Jesus overthrowing the false foundation of the legalistic system.
And casting it into the sea. The source has a specific take on what the sea represents here.
In biblical symbolism, the sea often represents the nations, or chaos, or the abyss. It represents total removal. But the key phrase the source emphasizes is, found no more at all.
Found no more at all. That sounds permanent, like you can't fix this.
It is the definition of permanent. This is a crucial theological point the source is making. The old covenant system isn't just broken and in need of repair. It isn't just on pause until a future date.
Which some people teach.
But this source argues it is abolished. It is at the bottom of the sea. You cannot go down and retrieve it. It has been replaced by the new.
That is a liberating thought, but also a challenging one for anyone trying to cling to the old ways. It's gone.
It's gone, and the silence that follows is deafening.
That leads us to the aftermath, verses 22 and 23. This part of the chapter feels like walking through a ghost town. The music stops. The craftsmen stop.
It's the total cessation of temple life. It's like God is going through and flipping off all the circuit breakers one by one. The source walks through these specific elements to show just how thorough this judgment is.
Let's go through them. First, musicians and harpers.
That's the worship. The Levitical choirs, it's gone. The glory has departed, just like in the days of Ichabod in the Old Testament.
No more choir.
No more choirs and craftsmen. No more building or maintaining the physical structure. The temple was in a constant state of upkeep and beautification. That work is done. It's over.
And the grinding of the millstone, what's that about?
This refers to the preparation of the grain offerings, the meal offerings, the daily sacrifices and rituals stop. There's no more grain being ground for the altar.
And the light of the candle.
The menorah, the lampstand in the holy place, it's out. It has been extinguished. Why? Because the true light, Jesus, has come. You don't need a candle when the sun has risen. But for those who rejected the sun, they are now left in total darkness.
But the saddest line, the one that really gets me, is this. The voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more.
That is the heartbreak of the chapter. That's the relational core of it all. The voice of the bridegroom is the voice of God in covenant with his people. The voice of the bride is the joyful response of the people.
Like wedding celebrations.
Exactly. It's the sound of life and love and covenant. This source says this means the intimate covenant relationship is gone from that system. God has left the building.
He's not there anymore. It's an empty shell.
He's not there. The true bride, the church, is elsewhere. She has come out. She is united with Jesus outside the camp in a new covenant. But inside Babylon, inside that dead religious structure, there is only silence.
It's a haunting image. But the source says there's a reason for this total shutdown. It's not random. It's justice. We finally get the verdict in verse 24. In her was found the blood of prophets and saints.
This is the crime scene investigation. When the walls fall, the bodies are found. The source makes a very strong connection here to Jesus' words in Matthew 23. This is really the clincher for the identification of Babylon.
Remind us what he said there.
Jesus was standing in Jerusalem talking to the religious leaders. He said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee."
He called them out directly.
Directly. He explicitly accused that system, that city, of being responsible for all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from Abel to Zechariah.
And Revelation 18 repeats that exact charge against Babylon.
Almost word for word. In her was found the blood of prophets and saints. This is the smoking gun. Think about it. Did Rome kill the Old Testament prophets?
No.
Did New York City kill Zechariah? No. Jerusalem did. The system that was supposed to protect God's messengers actually murdered them. This verse makes it almost impossible for Babylon to be anyone other than that first-century apostate religious system.
That is a compelling argument. It really ties the whole Bible together, from Genesis with Abel all the way to the 1st century.
It does, and the source mentions the blood of Abel. Just as Abel's blood cried out from the ground for justice, the blood of the martyrs cried out against this system.
So the fall of Babylon isn't God being mean. It's God answering the prayers of the persecuted.
Precisely. It is vindication. God is just. He cannot let a system that kills his messengers continue forever. The fall of the false makes way for the true. The liberation of the bride required the collapse of the harlot system.
So if we zoom out, what does this all mean for us? For the person listening today who isn't living in 1st century Jerusalem, we've gone through the scary imagery, the judgment, the silence. But you said at the beginning, this is a story of liberation.
It is, because if Babylon is the system of performance-based religion, trying to earn your way to God, trading in works, maintaining a facade, then its fall is the best thing that could happen to us.
It means we don't have to live there anymore.
We don't have to live there. We are called to come out of her. And that call is still relevant. Because the spirit of Babylon, the mindset of trying to build our own way to God through religious effort, that's always trying to creep back in.
So Babylon can be a personal mindset, not just a historical system.
Absolutely. It's any system, internal or external, that relies on human works instead of Christ's finished work. Any system that says, you need to do more, be better, try harder to be acceptable to God.
That's exhausting.
It is exhausting, and it's a cage. The fall of Babylon means the door to that cage has been blown off its hinges. We don't have to buy what Jesus has already paid for. We don't have to build a tower to get to heaven. Heaven came down to us.
That's the so what, isn't it? It's a call to leave the stress of religious performance and enter the rest of the New Jerusalem, which is all about relationship and grace.
Exactly. The source suggests that every believer faces this choice constantly. Are we trying to build Babylon a reputation, a structure, a system of control, or are we willing to come out and trust simply in the finished work of the Lamb?
It's the difference between trying to be a queen who needs no help and being a bride who relies on her groom.
Beautifully put. The queen says, I sit a queen and shall see no sorrow. I have it all together. The bride says, I need you. I receive from you. Revelation 18 destroys the queen so the bride can be free.
That is a perspective shift that changes everything. Suddenly, this scary chapter is actually a love letter, a fierce, protective love letter.
It truly is. It's the story of God clearing away the clutter, the competition, the counterfeit, so he can be with his people in an authentic, grace-based relationship.
Well, I have certainly never looked at Revelation 18 like that before. It's a lot to process, but in a good way. It makes the back of the book feel a lot less like a horror movie and more like a rescue mission.
That's the power of context. When you understand what fell, you understand what stands. And what stands is the new covenant of grace, unshakable and eternal.
So as a final thought for you to chew on, the source makes this provocative point. Are we, in our own lives, still trying to trade in Babylon's marketplace? Are we trying to buy righteousness or peace or approval with our good behavior when Jesus already paid the ultimate price for it on the cross?
That's the question, isn't it? Are we living like liberated citizens of the New Jerusalem, or are we still trying to pay rent in a city that's been condemned?
Absolutely. Thank you for walking us through that. And to you listening, thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Hopefully, the next time you open to the back of the book, you won't feel like hiding under the covers. You'll hear the call to come out and find freedom. We'll see you on the next one.